Welcome, everybody. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking to my old friend, Russell Beck, who has just written this amazing new book, which, if you haven't read it, I suggest that you do, which is currently shortlisted for Leadership Book of the Year and is a Financial Times business book to read. I have read it. Russell, have you read it since it's been in print?
Once or twice.
Okay, excellent. Good. Well, I'm delighted to be chatting to you. And I'm sure that lots of people have asked you why you have written it and what started you on the road to this. I want to do something slightly different because, as you well know, our audience is HR leadership, which features heavily, implicitly and explicitly in this book. And as I referenced to you before we started recording, some might say we are preaching to the choir. However, the choir, as we know, also gets neglected quite a lot. The World of Work to 2030. I read this and I was nodding a lot as I read it, right? Because a lot of it is extremely common sense, and you have a lovely, natural layman's language, which means that, you know, no one's bamboozled by a business speak. It all seems remarkably logical. And then when you keep reading logical stuff over and over again, it gets alarming, just not alarmingly logical, just alarming. And I went through so many different emotions in the book of going, right, you know, we need to cut back on all the peripheral stuff. We need to work out what's core and not chore, one of your expressions. We need to, you know, remain deep, right? Tucker Stone, as an example, is going to look completely different. And then by chapter 5, I'd thrown all those ideas out the window, because actually it's all about the people. Which indeed it is, which is great news for my profession, your profession, and the HR community that I serve lovingly. So it's amazing how much, you know, several hundred pages of logic and really sort of grounded research can take you on such a journey. How do you feel having written it? Do you feel optimistic about what you've written about?
Hi, everyone. And thank you for inviting me onto the podcast and to have the opportunity to have a conversation, which is, I love having conversations.
And in typical style, I have launched straight into a question for you, Russell, and I forgot to introduce you or ask you to introduce yourself. So Russell and I have known each other for a really, really long time. Russell has run businesses. He has managed huge, great teams. He's been in recruitment for many years and now in the sphere of leadership development and runs his own business. But Russell, give us a quick synopsis of Russell Beck from early to today.
Well, a quick synopsis. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. It's so originally trained as an engineer. My degree is in engineering, and my first career was designing mobile networks around the world. So I've worked in over 25 countries and on projects of $500 million of infrastructure spend and so forth. And then .com killed that. Big story, but for brevity, .com killed that, and I moved into the people side of things, leveraging my engineering technical knowledge in a technical recruitment consultancy. I then became European head of talent for Yahoo, built their entire European recruitment team. I then was number 2 in what is now Pinstripe Ochre House. I was managing director of what is now Guidant Group. So I took over their business, the outsourcing business, and grew it to 120 million turnover, and then left the corporate world in February 2020 to join a small consulting company. And what could possibly go wrong in February 2020? But it's been
sure no one knows what you're talking about.
It's been amazing and fantastic. And actually, yeah, we've now got a book out. It's brilliant.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, we'll get back to our questions now that I've given you a chance to tell everybody who you are.
So do I feel optimistic about what I've written about? And thank you for your kind words about the book. The one word you said a couple of times which struck me was logic. And logical. I mean, my background, my first career, my qualifications are in engineering. So I'm an engineer by trade, by profession, if you like. And therefore, I guess that's come through. And some things, if you want an opinion, I'm more than happy to give you ones. But what I wanted to do in the book was to actually back it up by research
Mm.
and very tangibly. And then the subtitle to the book, I mean, you've mentioned the main one, that the world of work's 2030, and that's nice. And it was designed to be 2030, so it's a short time frame.
Yeah.
So it's realistic, because if it was any further than 2030, it's Star Trek, it's Beam Me Up Scotty, it's Warp Factor 10, and actually that's no help to anyone. Might be interesting, but it's no help. So it's 2030 to be short enough to have a practical impact, and that's the subtitle, a practical way and how you can future-proof your business and your career. And so, and as you've hinted, it was very much looking at what's going on in the world, and then through a series of lenses, answering the question, so what? Yeah, so all that's going on, nice. But what does that mean from a business context, from a people context, from a skills context, from a sustainability context, and from the context of, blimey, if this is all going on, how do I have a career for the next 10, 20, 40 plus years?
Yeah. And what I like is that you've just referred to all the various different audiences or readers who could be consuming the book. And of course, it's interesting that it's Leadership Book of the Year, because it's not just for leaders, is it? It's not just for business leaders. It's not just for people leaders. It could be anyone reading this to want to know what their work world will look like in the next 6-7 years. And you intimate how quickly things are moving by saying, at the time of writing, this is happening. Do you feel, in talking of times and how quickly things are changing, and we'll talk lots about what the future in the short, medium term looks like, I'm sure, but how much do you feel this is still in date, only 9 months after publication?
I think it still is massively in date. And you've kind of hinted a little by saying, as you read it, you were struck by, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's logical. Yeah, common sense, common sense, common sense, common sense. And, to a greater or lesser extent, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I think what the noise, the headlines, the hype has missed, and you can pick any of the different elements, but pick the main one of technology and AI, for example. The hype of that is that technology is destroying jobs. It's not. Technology is not destroying jobs at all. If you look, we are at a global low of unemployment.
I know.
Across the UK, the US, Germany, Italy, Australia, Singapore, wherever you look, we are at a global low of unemployment after however many decades of technology trying to destroy jobs. It's done a pretty poor job of it. What technology does, and this is the whole chapter on future skills, is it doesn't destroy jobs. It destroys skills. It destroys your uniqueness. It destroys why you were picked for the job in the first place. It democratizes work. That has a challenge for individuals, because I got that job because I was brilliant at PowerPoint or Excel or presenting or selling or whatever that is. Yeah. So it destroys my uniqueness as an individual. For businesses, that opens up pools of talent that you've never previously considered. Because who do you pick now?
Yeah.
And do you know? And when I say no, with my engineering hat on, can you prove that skill, capability, behavior is what predicts success or failure in your organization?
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that technology destroys jobs, because that's one way of looking at it. Otherwise, it's the journey of opportunity. Actually, if you weren't right for something then, you may be right for something new in the future. And the other thing that's interesting is you talk later on in the book about consistency. If you're going to look at what great looks like, success looks like in an individual, and who's going to be right for your organization, you talk about consistency. And consistency is hard in a world of change. And of course, what we're talking about is constant and consistent change. So that all these things are scary concepts for beings that naturally don't like change. And as you say, there is hype around all this stuff. But one thing technology does do is allow the hype. we can all consume way more news and information than we could even 20 years ago. And I found myself Googling this morning, what jobs don't exist now that were here in 2000? Because I just wanted to, affirm to myself that actually, so much has changed in the last 24 years, and I've been working since then, and I'll probably be working for the next 20 years, that this sort of change isn't any faster than anything else. We just know about it faster because technology allows us to hear it, watch it, read it, in all forms of technology that's absolutely everywhere. So it's more about us absorbing the information and the information being there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I quote it in the book, a rough rule of thumb, something like 60% of the jobs 10 years from now haven't been even thought of yet. Never ask your kids what they want to be when they grow up. It's an irrelevant conversation.
Yeah.
And a proof point of that would be if I'd have said to you 3 years ago, even, you want to be a prompt engineer. Be a prompt engineer. You've been wondering why I'm recommending you go into theatre, to prompt the person who's forgotten their lines on stage kind of thing. But now it's one of the hottest jobs around. So you can't really predict the jobs of the future, but you can look at the skills that will be in demand by business and therefore will be useful to have as individuals. And you can certainly look at those and start to tease those out.
Yeah. And I think, to bring this to our HR community, I think what we need to do and what business needs to do is cut through the hype and go, okay, fine. Actually predicting jobs of the future it's not science fiction. And when you say things like we don't know what that will mean, well, let's grab the stuff that we do know what it means. We do know, as you say in the book, that the human elements will still remain. They've always remained. They'll remain even more if process is taken away, if technology does a lot of the drudgery. Then the humanness is the most important thing. So let's focus on that. And that makes you, these are where the hard questions are, because you can't necessarily use past performance as predictors of success, and you can't necessarily use experience in X, Y, and Z if you don't know what experience you want in the next 5 to 10 years. So what are you hiring for? The human bit. Which means, as you say in the book, you've got to have a rigorous recruitment process. And I'm in the world of recruitment. Obviously I am an interviewing expert, but I read a lot of this going, don't do that myself. Definitely don't do that myself. Definitely should do that next time I'm hiring for Tuckerstone. But it's amazing, isn't it? Because we are naturally, you want to relate, and you want to embrace diversity, embrace the things that you think will make people successful, but actually it's really quite scientific. Even the human stuff is scientific. What do you think of that?
I think, I do a whole chapter on people strategy, and actually what I wanted to do was juxtapose, I had a chapter on business strategy. So what does all that mean for business and from the business angle and the business side of things? But actually, what does that therefore also mean from the people side of things? And so kind of yin and yang it, if you want, and looking at it from both ways. And in that people strategy chapter, I look at a model, the 6 C's. Yeah. And actually, this is what people, humans, us, want from work. And the first C is compensation. And of course, pay is always a really important element of any engagement and work, but it's never enough. I think is it probably Olivia, you'll know this much better than me in terms of the data, but it's something like 80% of people who resign but accept a counter offer still leave in the next 6 months.
And that has forever been true.
Yeah.
And that is nothing to do with technology. That's nothing to do with anything, in the entire time. And it used to be one of those apocryphal statistics. I'm glad that you've proven it. But, people always used to say it as part of the story of to candidates not to accept a counteroffer. But, it is absolutely true, because it's just not only about the money. Never is.
It sounds important. I mean, don't get me wrong. Who doesn't want a pay rise? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like lip balm, it wears off.
Mhm.
And once it's worn off, the work may still be degrading and not being developed. So I
Yeah.
don't enjoy the company, the people I'm with, I'm not being treated well, etc.,
Yeah.
etc., etc. And that's where the other C's come in terms of community. You know, this sense of belonging and
Mhm.
feeling we're all on it together. I can be my authentic self and I'm
Yeah.
accepted for that. You know,
Yeah.
McKinsey came out and said 51% of people have left an organization because they don't have a sense of belonging.
Mm.
You know, it's not soft and fluffy. It's
Mm.
hard data in terms of the impact it has. You've got career in terms of whether people are being developed. You've got cause. You know, hopefully everyone knows what they're doing. Hopefully everyone knows how to do it, but do they know why they're doing it?
Mm.
And actually, on culture is always an interesting one because actually, I think too many organizations, when they're struggling with hiring, try and be everything to everybody,
Yeah.
but in so doing, end up being nothing to everyone.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And I also think, you know, back to what you just said about the hopefully everyone knows what they're doing and how to do it. I think that that's not always the case right now. And it's linked to culture. It's because for me, a major question is what work gets done where and how by team members. So everybody, and you must be hearing this all the time in your community, is still struggling with where people work. You know, how much is office, how much is team, how much is on Teams, from home, from wherever. You know, there are people who are asking to come back into the office. There's the hybrid world. So actually the how is an extra piece. And it's something that is on everybody's lips. There doesn't seem to be a right, but actually don't try and be all things to all people. If you have a view on it, whatever that is, stick to it, be brave. And then you'll help people know the why, because they'll get the how. And it's something, you know, it's something that we're struggling with. You know, our day-to-day working lives are more complicated. They're easier in some ways because I can talk to you wherever you are today from the comfort of my home office. But together, you know, as a team, Tuckerstone's not together as much as we all think we should be, but also we don't get to meet our clients and candidates as much as we should or want to, because they're not there either. And you don't have the same rhythm of work. And so I think the how of whatever the work is, along with what the work will be, is tied into this whole cultural piece, which I think is extremely delicate at the moment. Culture and the sense of belonging, and I mean the sense of belonging not just in a diversity setting or an inclusion setting, but how do you belong anywhere when you don't see who you work with? And you know, you mentioned at one point that, you know, just a change of email address, you could be doing the same work for somebody else. Well, you know, yes, but also no. Isn't that depressing for everybody? So are you talking to people about that kind of future of work as well, in terms of rhythm and activities and what work gets done where?
So in the business strategy chapter, I look at the end of that at the office, and at the office in terms of the office environment,
Yes.
within which we ask our people to work and working flexibly. And I think those two are, and I've already used the phrase, the yin and the yang, they go together. You can't look at either of those in isolation, because, you know, what work do you want done and what is the most productive way of delivering the outcome that you are paying someone to do? Surely that is the question. And it goes to, and you hinted at it in your question just then, in don't copy. Don't copy someone just because someone has issued an edict saying get back in the office or pretend to work somewhere else. Yeah, that's, one assumes, right for that company. It doesn't mean it's right for you, because each company is unique, and is unique in terms of the people, the processes, the technology, how they work, where they work, what they're trying to do, and so on.
If you were to practice, because you do reference that it's much harder to do some of these things than it is to write about it. If you were to take your own advice, what would be the three things that you would concentrate on most as a leader of a business from tomorrow?
I think listen.
Yeah.
The one thing I think the one thing I struggle with is hearing the other person out and ensuring, and I have to consciously do it. I'm more of a extrovert than an introvert, as you may have guessed from the arm waving throughout the last couple of minutes or so. So I have to consciously work at that, but I believe that the power of listening to someone and letting them complete their waves of thinking takes you far beyond where you thought you were going to get to in a conversation. So absolutely that. So the first one's listening. The second one is I would be very conscious of my leadership shadow. The leadership shadow, I'm sure a number of people listening to this may have heard of it. It can be called leadership shadow, leadership ripple. It can be called, the Bezos commented, it's in effect your personal brand. It's all those elements intertwining. And leadership shadow is 4 circles: what you say, what you do, what you measure, and what you prioritize. And the shadow you cast, the ripple you cause as a leader, is the alignment where those 4 overlap. Talk, fantastic, but talk is cheap. What are your actions? Do your actions back up what you say you wanted to do or not do, or how you said it, how you repeated it, both formally, informally, and so forth? What do you measure? Does that align to what your actions are and what you're saying is important, and what are you prioritizing? I think the third one, and it's we've touched on it, I think the third really important one is this sense of belonging. And this sense that creating an environment or a community or a space where everyone feels they can be their authentic selves together. Not feeling that you can be your authentic self, you can be who you are, masking, hiding part of yourself, takes a massive emotional and psychological overhead.
Yeah.
And in our family, we know firsthand how much effort that takes and the ramifications of where that can go. So allowing people to be themselves, I think, is my third and a really important thing.
I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you, as I always do. And everybody who is watching this, go out and buy this book. It is a remarkably good read, and I will publish a picture of me reading it with my puppy, also enjoying reading it with me. So Russell, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Have a great day, week, month, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.